This is Rock and Roll English. Real people, real English. Here's your host, Martin Johnston.
Hello everyone and welcome to a special episode of Rock and Roll English, because I am here to tell you how to remember advanced English vocabulary the natural way, okay? Because everyone wants to have a good vocabulary, don't they? Even me, to be honest. My English vocabulary, as we know, is not great. But here is the way for you to expand your vocabulary the natural way without studying. I repeat, without studying. But before we start, just a quick statistic which I absolutely love to share with people. So, did you know that the most common 1,000 words in English, which is not a lot, I guarantee if you're listening to this podcast, you already know 1,000 words. In fact, already in this podcast, I have probably used about 400 words. So you definitely know 1,000 words. And these most common 1,000 words, which again are really simple words like begin, go, eat, they make up 89% of daily communication. So if you know these 1,000 words, which you do, you should be able to understand 89% of daily communication. Now, the problem generally is that you can't recognize these words, but that's another thing. That's my jungle listening course. So we really are only talking about 11% of words, because 89% of daily communication is words you already know. So there's just that other 11%. And it's always good when we know more vocabulary. It makes us feel good, doesn't it, when we use a new word? But the problem is trying to remember this vocabulary, because the reason you have difficulty with this vocabulary is because it is not common. For example, words like pen, bottle, phone, these are very common words, so you see them a lot, you hear them a lot, so you just remember them. I don't think to remember the words pen, bottle and phone, you needed like a vocabulary list to study every day before you went to bed. You just picked these up naturally because they are very common. Now, this other 11% of words obviously is not very common. So even when you learn a new word, the problem is you don't see it again. Maybe for months, maybe for years. It depends how much you listen, of course. But what if we could make all advanced vocabulary common as words like pen, bottle and phone, so that you wouldn't need to study every day before you go to bed, look at vocabulary lists, write the word, hear the word, etc., etc. What if these words became so common that you could remember them naturally without actually doing anything? Well, I have something for you, because I have created a new course called the No Study British English Vocabulary Masterclass. Okay, now let me tell you how it works. It's not on sale yet, but it will be very soon in my Black Friday offer, which will be an absolutely crazy offer, because I am going to offer this course, my jungle listening course, and 500 Rock and Roll Family episodes. Now, just to tell you the value of these courses, each thing basically costs £200. So 200 for my new vocabulary course, 200 for Rock and Roll English, and 200 for 500 family episodes, all with a transcript. So that's £600 in total value, and I will be selling this for a ridiculously low price just for Black Friday for £147. And I don't know if I will ever do this again. Again, it's my business mentor guy that is helping me, and he has convinced me to do this. But anyway, let's stop talking about that. And I just want to tell you more about this course that I have created, the No Study British English Vocabulary Masterclass. Okay, and I want to give you a demonstration of how it works, because I have taken vocabulary presentations that I made for the podcast in the past and I am reusing them. So here is how it works. On this course, which, by the way, will be delivered only through podcasts, no going to the computer and logging in on a difficult course platform. It will all be via podcasts. So on day 1, you will receive a podcast with a presentation of language. Usually there will be 10 pieces of vocabulary presented in the context in which they were used on the podcast. And you can consume this via the podcast, or if you click the link inside the podcast, you will be able to watch a video presentation, usually very funny, lots of stupid pictures where the vocabulary comes to life. Then on day 3, you will hear the vocabulary again, but in a different context. This time I will share a personal story with you for each term, for each new piece of vocabulary. Then on day 5, notice there is a break. We have day 1, day 3, then day 5, so that your brain has time to relax. This is called spaced out repetition, which allows you to remember vocabulary in a natural way. So, as I said, day 1, the vocabulary is presented, podcast or video, whatever you prefer. Day 3, the vocabulary is repeated with personal stories from me. And day 5, all of the vocabulary will be in one childlike story, let's say. Then we will move on to week 2, and again there will be 10 new pieces of vocabulary. But here is the fundamental, most interesting point. All of the vocabulary from previous weeks will be constantly reused, so that you hear the vocabulary so often it becomes common to you, like the words pen, phone, and bottle. And this podcast course lasts 52 weeks, 1 year. Again, I am crazy. I can't believe I'm doing this for so long, but I am, because I am sure that this method works and it will be a game changer for you. There is no other course, from what I know, that builds vocabulary step by step and reuses vocabulary over such a long time. So that is what I am creating for you. Now, that probably hasn't made much sense to you, so I want to give you a demonstration. So let's say that today is day 1. Okay, this is the podcast for day 1. So I am now going to present you the vocabulary. So now you can listen to this, or you can stop the video, click the link inside the description to the podcast and consume this via video. It's up to you. But before you do that, make sure you join the waiting list to hear about my Black Friday offer, to make sure you are the first to hear about this offer, because as I told you, I am selling 3 courses that normally sell for £200 each, so £600 in total. The 3 courses being my jungle listening course, this new vocabulary course, and 500 rock and roll family episodes, all with transcripts. And I am selling this for a ridiculously low price of £147. So get on the list so you are the first to take advantage of this offer, because I am only doing it for 50 people. That's it. So if you're not one of the 50 people, then you will not be able to take advantage of this offer. So again, stop the podcast, and in the podcast you are listening to, there is a link where you can register your interest for this Black Friday offer. It will take you about 20 seconds to complete this form. So let's now go to day 1, let's say day 1 of my new vocabulary course, okay? One other important thing is on this course, which basically is 3 podcasts a week, each of the podcasts will always be under 10 minutes long. So it's a very easy course to consume, because all you need to do is listen. You don't need to be in front of your computer and sign into a course platform where it's really difficult to remember your password and stuff like this. It will all be delivered via a secret podcast. So again, here is day 1, episode 1 of the new course. And then tomorrow I will give you the next episode, where the vocabulary will be repeated with personal stories, and the day after tomorrow, the third episode, where the vocabulary will be repeated in a crazy story. So again, if it doesn't make sense, don't worry, just listen to today's podcast, tomorrow's podcast, and Thursday's podcast. Are you ready? Let's go. Remember, this is me presenting you the vocabulary, and if you want, you can watch this in video form where the vocabulary comes to life a bit more. Happy listening. So here we are for episode 1 of the first week of the British English Vocabulary Masterclass, where we are talking about episode 245, when I spoke to my friend Corporal Comer about the things we all do, but no one talks about. Now, before we begin this podcast, remember there is the video version available of this in the podcast you are listening to. I actually recommend watching the video. I mean, the best thing is listen to the podcast and watch the video, but maybe you don't want to do that because you've got other things to do. But the video version is better because it brings the vocabulary to life. So if you are not walking and you can watch a video, I recommend stopping this podcast, and in the description to the podcast there is the link to the video. But just listening to this podcast version is also absolutely fine. So let's start talking about the vocabulary from episode 245, when I spoke to my friend Corporal Comer about the things that we all do but no one talks about. So the reason I chose my friend Corporal Comer to talk about this topic is because he's just a normal guy. There's nothing fantastic about him, but there's nothing terrible. He's just a normal guy, and that's how I described him on the podcast. And Corporal Comer said to me, "That's me all over." A lovely term there. So when you say that, it means it just sums up your typical behaviour. That's me all over. For example, when Donald Trump says something stupid, you kind of just say, yep, that's him all over. That sums up his typical behaviour. Then we were talking about when you need to go to the toilet at night, and you maybe wake up in the middle of the night and you think, oh, I need to go to the toilet. But then you think, actually, no, I'm going to go back to sleep. But then it keeps playing in your head and you think, oh, no, I will go. No, I won't go. And this continues just basically so you can't sleep. And Corporal Comer described this situation as a vicious circle. So a vicious circle is just when an unpleasant situation, like waking up in the middle of the night and needing to go to the toilet, just keeps continuing. It doesn't stop, like when you wake up at night. And I mentioned that it could be useful for men to have a bottle next to the bed, because then, if you need to go, you don't need to really get out of bed, do you? You could just do it, I suppose, in bed. Sorry for sounding disgusting. Now, I have never done this, but not in the bed anyway. When I was at university, I did have a bottle in my room because the toilet was down 2 flights of stairs, okay? And on the podcast, I described the bottle as a godsend. Okay, so a godsend is something very helpful, like God sent it to you. So it was as if God sent me that bottle in the middle of the night. So on a cold January night, when it was 3 o'clock in the morning, I didn't need to walk down 2 flights of stairs. I could just go in the bottle. The bottle was a godsend. So another thing we were talking about with Corporal Comer is arguing in your head, okay? Because this is something we all do, but no one ever talks about. I certainly do. Is I'm angry with someone, and then I'm constantly imagining what's going to happen when I talk to this person about it. And I imagine the argument, okay? Now, when I told Corporal Coma that, he said that didn't really resonate with him. So when something resonates with you, you have shared feelings. It's like, oh yeah, that really resonates with me. I'm the same. But he used it in a negative form because it doesn't resonate with him, because he doesn't actually do that. I really thought everyone had arguments with people in their head, imaginary arguments, but apparently not, because it doesn't resonate with Corporal Coma. Then in the family podcasts, which are always a bit more chit-chat about our normal lives, I was telling Corporal Coma that I was living in Italy at the time, and I went to a place called the Chicken House, and I paid for my chicken and chips, and then the payment, because I paid on my card, went through. So when something goes through, it is approved or accepted. So my payment was accepted on the card. It went through. But then they said that the payment hadn't gone through, and they asked me to pay again. Now, because I went to this place very often, the Chicken House, and I loved the chicken there, I didn't really want to cause a big scene, and the chicken was very cheap. It was like €9. So to avoid any problems, I simply paid again. Now, Corporal Coma then said to me, he was surprised by this, let's say. He thought I would have faced the situation and refused to pay, and he said, I thought you would have stood your ground and not paid. So when you stand your ground, it's exactly this. You defend yourself and say, no, I have paid. The payment went through. I am not paying again. But I chose not to stand my ground in this particular situation. But I then said to Corporal Coma that I would never set foot in that place again. So when you set foot in a place, you obviously enter that place. Now, this is usually always used in the negative, to say I would never go there again. I would never set foot in that place again. But in the end, that wasn't true, because I went back to that place and had chicken many more times. I then mentioned as a joke that they threw me out of the shop. Okay, and I likened this. I said this was very similar to when I was at school and they sent you out of the classroom. The teacher said, get out. And then you had to, quite embarrassingly, wait outside the classroom. And what I used to do was just have a little peek through the window on the door so I could look at my friends in the classroom. So a little peek is a lovely word. So it means a little secret look. Okay, now this is different from a word like glance, for example, because if you have a glance, there's nothing really secret about it. But when you have a peek, it's secret, because I didn't want the teacher to know I was probably making stupid faces at my friends still sitting in the classroom. So I just had a peek through the window. Another story that I told Corporal Coma was that someone reached out to me to ask if I could do a seminar. So when you reach out to someone, it's when you contact them, usually for the first time. And the person asked me if I could do a seminar on the 25th of December. So I said, thanks for reaching out. Thanks for contacting me. But unfortunately, I'm busy that day because it's Christmas Day. And during this time of the podcast, I had another job, a side job. And on one of the first days, one of the managers was talking to me, and we were talking about recent graduates. And he said to me a very strange question. Do you know what a recent graduate is? Now, I didn't want to make him feel stupid when I responded, because in reality I wanted to say, of course I know, but that would have been patronizing. Okay, so something that is patronizing is when you talk to someone as if they are stupid. So if I had said, yeah, he would have felt stupid. So I tried not to be patronising and I simply responded, yes, it's someone that's recently graduated, right? I'm not sure if that was patronising in the end, but it was a very difficult thing to not sound patronising too. Remember, that can also be a verb, to patronise someone. So that is all of the vocabulary this week. Remember, you can watch the video, which is basically the same as what you have just heard, but with some images which will bring this vocabulary to life. So highly recommended. And there are also the flashcards in the description to this podcast you are listening to right now. So go and check them out. And then in a couple of days, you will have another podcast where I will give lots of other personal examples with all of this vocabulary. Then at the end of the week, we will have it all in a story. So thanks a lot for listening. I will see you very soon. But in the meantime, just keep on rocking, baby. Okay, so that was the vocabulary presentation. So you now have 10 new terms which have been presented to you. Obviously, I don't expect you to remember them. That's my job to help you remember them. So tomorrow you will hear another podcast with these terms which will be repeated, and again the next day. Remember, this is just an example of 1 week. Then, if you do the course, these terms will be repeated constantly over a 52-week period so that they become so common you remember them naturally without having to study. That's why it's called the No Study British English Vocabulary Masterclass. Just remember, don't forget to register your interest for this crazy Black Friday offer, because if you're interested in this course, this vocabulary course, you will be able to get it for a lower price than it will sell for, and you will get 2 other courses for free with it. So remember, pause the episode and register your interest so you are the first to hear about this course. I will put it on offer to people on the waiting list 48 hours before anybody else, okay? So you will have 48 hours to buy the course before anyone else does, okay? Remember, there are only 50 places available. So thanks everyone for listening. I will see you all again tomorrow. But in the meantime, just keep on rocking, baby.
Thanks so much for listening to Rock and Roll English. For more great content and to stay up to date, visit rockandrollenglish.com and facebook.com/rockandrollenglish. We'll catch you next time.